Good afternoon. Welcome to the weekly livestock market update. I'm Brownfield Anchor reporter Meghan Grebner with us as always to talk all things markets. University of Missouri, Scott Brown. Good afternoon, Scott.
Good afternoon, Megan.
Here's to having a Friday to have numbers to talk about this week. I have never been so excited to see that the government didn't shut down as I was over the weekend.
Let's hope we can find the same answer when we get here to the middle part of November and Congress doesn't shut down then. But it is nice to have numbers to talk about this week.
Kevin McCarthy may not be having the same conversation we are today, but it has definitely been interesting to watch how all of this has unfolded and how everything has come into play.
It has, and I'll say we lost some ground on cattle markets this week. It was nice to have government reports open for us to be able to be tracking what's going on there.
All right, we're going to talk a little jobs data. We're going to talk some monthly trade data this week. Those are our two big items of interest. But to kick things off, let's recap what happened this week in the markets.
Megan, this week on the cattle side, live fed cattle were about $1.90 lower this week. We also lost ground in those feeder cattle markets. They were anywhere from 2 to 6 lower this week. The December live cattle futures contract was down $1.35, and we lost about $4 in that November feeder cattle contract this week. Box beef prices were about 90 cents lower this week. And on the hog side, cash barrels and gilts down about $2.75. The December lean hog futures contract was up about $1.50. And we lost $3.10 on the pork cutout value this week. Thank you for lower bellies for much of that decline.
Pulling back some this week, does some of the disorientation, like the chaos that's happening in Washington, D.C., does that leave some uncertainties about the broader picture? And does that then carry over and put pressure on our markets like we've seen a lot this week?
I think it does. And I'll say, I don't think, well, on the hog side, I don't think hogs and pigs was terribly good news for those markets. And I think we're still seeing some of the remnants of that weakness. I'll just say, when you're at record cattle prices like we were the week before, there's likely always more downside risk. And I think we got a little taste of that this week. Again, I'm not sure the fundamentals there changed all that much. And so perhaps we'll still get higher here as we go. But reminding us to protect that downside risk is always important.
Risk management seems to be a key of conversations, really has been throughout this year. Scott, as we take a look at these reports, job report was out today. Talk to me a little bit about what those September numbers reflect and what that potentially means on the demand side of things.
Yeah, so certainly surprised, I think, everyone in the jobs report we got today. 336,000 new jobs added in September of this month. Unemployment actually rate held steady at 3.8%. But when you realize pre-report estimates, midpoint would have been 170,000 jobs. We blew past that with what happened in September. And maybe just as important was some revisions to both July and August data. We added another 119,000 jobs in revisions for both July and the total of July and August, which put both of those months over 200,000 of new jobs added. So fairly good news on the jobs front. And, we hear a lot about the strikes that are going on. Maybe we'll still take a step back as we look at next month's report, but perhaps that's signaling stronger demand for us on the meat side of the equation.
Does that potentially put us in that inflation conversation again, which is, to me, the most interesting, maybe, and baffling conversation that you and I have had in recent months is we're adding jobs, but that also means maybe we're not slowing things down the way we should be?
Yeah, so that tug and pull makes it difficult to decide what to say And again, adding jobs, face value, more money in pockets, better for meat demand. But if that continues to push inflation higher and the Fed says, hey, we need another increase in rates, that gets tough on markets as well. So it's, again, it's driving the car with with your feet on both the brake and accelerator at the same time. And it's hard to know which one you're pushing the hardest on. But it's certainly a different environment than I think we found ourselves in 10 or 20 years ago, where this would have all been positive for jobs. But the inflation that we've been trying to get through certainly changes that overall implication, I think, a little bit.
Scott, let's talk monthly trade data as we take a look at that. Really interesting to see. I guess I get to use my hand signals again this week to see how beef and pork are going.
I thought it was this and this.
I thought maybe a more gradual shape would be better.
So number one, we'll start with beef, which is the negative side of this equation. And I'll remind us, we have record prices, which I think has hurt us in terms of being able to export product. When you look at August 2023 data, USDA told us 260 million pounds of beef exported out of the United States, down 20.3% relative to what we did a year ago. And year to date, we're down nearly 14%. When you look across the board, China, Japan, South Korea are all down. And the only country that I keep in the top 4 is Mexico, that's actually up. Now, small numbers when you look at Mexico, but roughly 15% or so above year-ago levels. Reminds us that our neighbors to the south are important in this discussion. Now, on the pork side, again, I'll say lower hog prices, lower pork prices, I think has been helpful to the export side. So we did 527 million pounds of pork out of the United States in August. That's 2.6% above a year ago. China was actually down about 25 million pounds this month. Japan was up. Mexico was still higher, but it's everybody else. So when you look at that, all right, so China, Japan, South Korea, Mexico being separated, then it's everybody else. Everybody else up 20 million pounds or so, a little more than 20 million pounds. That's where we get some lift right now in terms of those overall numbers. So this idea we're building a lot of new opportunities, new countries are important. That shows in the year-to-date numbers as well. Year-to-date, we've pushed out 4.5 billion pounds of pork. That's 8.1% above what we did last year. So, but better news, and maybe the news the pork industry needs in what's otherwise growing supplies that have made this a tough year.
So you're saying the diversification in markets for pork would be the rose and the beef exports would just be the thorn of the week?
Perhaps that's the way to talk about it. Well, let's hope I should be careful about saying this, but I think with some lower beef prices at some point down the road, we likely can talk about growing exports again, but it may be tough here for a period of time.
Scott, I want to talk a little bit about and we alluded to this earlier, jokingly, about the chaos in Washington, D.C., but I think it also needs to be discussed in terms of the fact that we've pushed through a farm bill expiration date. We don't have an extension. We're still working on appropriations bills on the House side of things, and we don't have the government funded. So we have like 42-ish days, 40 days to get all of that done, at least on the government funding side of things. what happened this week and the fact that the House is at a stalemate until they get a new speaker selected due to that whole farm bill conversation and getting it either extended or across the finish line?
Yes. All right. So I'll say we need to do one or the other. Let's make sure we just can't live forever in because we're really under permanent law right now. The issue is a lot of things aren't kicking in yet relative to permanent law. The further we go, the more things kick in. We're already seeing USDA tell us there's a few things that they're no longer able to do because they don't have authorization to do those with the expiration of the Farm Bill. That list just will grow as we go through time. So there's so much to be done. I think it crowds out an opportunity for us to get a new Farm Bill to the finish line too quickly. To me, it's how quickly do we get a speaker in place, and then the problems that have existed on the House side, do those go away or not? It's not clear to me just because we have a new speaker that we aren't going to have the same sorts of problems unfold as we think about coming up against the deadline of the current CR we're under. And if Congress can't move forward, it's going to be hard to find floor time to do anything related to foreign policy, and probably just increases the likelihood of a straight extension and pushing it down the road a little bit further.
Does some of the polarization that we've been seeing in the political realm, especially when you think about how traditionally bipartisan the Senate Ag and the House Ag committees are, and they've always worked. There's been disagreements, but they've worked cohesively and they've worked well together. The more crazy things get, does that really work as a disservice to a bipartisan approach to getting a farm bill done? Because you've got to have the rural folks, but you also have to have the urban members of Congress on board with it as well.
Yeah, so I think getting the House, so we need 218 votes at the end of the day. How do you get those 218 votes to get a farm bill done? So I think it's changed the metrics now. We've already seen times when the farm bill fell on the floor of the House, so it wouldn't be the first time. But I think if I'm in leadership of the Ag Committee, I have to look ahead to what can I get done off the floor of the House that I can get 218 votes for, and that's a monumental task, I believe, right now, to find that kind of in between, and then something the Senate would agree to. So the battle, I think, is big. Gone are the days where we had enough bipartisan support that I think when the Farm Bill would go to the floor, others were looking to the Ag Committee to lead that, and there's just that's not the same situation that we find ourselves in today.
It definitely is going to be interesting to watch this unfold, and it's been interesting. I love a Farm Bill year anyway, but this has been one for the books, I think.
Yeah, well, so yeah, it's very different. I like to remind us we haven't written a Farm Bill very much on time lately. 18 was probably the easiest we had in a while, but it sometimes takes a while, and I'll sometimes come back to say, U.S. net farm income in 2022 was north of $180 billion. I don't know that members of Congress are getting lots of calls from producers talking about financial pressure that they face. That may be the missing piece to get this next Farm Bill to the finish line. And we'll see what happens. We're forecasting lower farm income this year and for 2024. So maybe that's the impetus that is needed to try to help get a Farm Bill done as well.
Scott, as we wrap up today, a couple of demand side and consumer reports next week, but the big one, supply and demand. What are you looking for in next week's supply and demand numbers?
Yeah, so of course, I think the big question is yields, corn and soybean yields in particular. Does USDA make big adjustments to those? Um, I don't want to be in their shoes, still trying to figure out what yields are like. Anecdotally, I think you can find numbers all over the board, and just the sheer variability in small geographic regions just reminds me how tough it is this year. But so it seems like that's going to be one of the bigger issues that I'll be looking for out of next week's honesty report.
So you're telling me in your next professional career, you don't want to be a USDA analyst?
I don't think I want to be a USDA analyst, and I would just want you to think about those USDA analysts that are out there doing the actual survey work, that are going out in fields to look at yields. My guess is they sometimes aren't the most welcome on individual fields doing that kind of survey work.
So thank you for what you do and what they do to be able to provide us with the information we need.
And I would remind, yes, for sure. And I would remind producers that public information is valuable. I sure don't want to lose it. And that I won't make a lot of friends probably by saying that out loud, but that kind of data is important to what we're doing.
Scott, it's always great to see you. We will check in with you next Friday.
Sounds good, Megan.
So our weekly livestock market update delivered to your email box every Saturday morning. Go to brownfieldagnews.com. You can also submit questions and comments there. And for a daily rundown of what happens in the commodity markets, make sure to check out John Perkins' Market Minute. Have a great weekend. I'm Meghan Grebner for Brownfield.